Welcome, apes. I have good news. I should be back with you live tomorrow. I do have one last lesson I'd like to cover before we leave the topic of fossil fuels. This entire course builds up to the concept of human-caused climate change, and fossil fuels certainly play a big role in that. But there's something else that we've done in a very short amount of time by moving all that carbon from the ground and adding it to our consumerism society. Millions and millions of years from now, once our civilization has been crushed and decomposed and layers of new civilization stacked on top of it, there will be a defining mark that we left behind, and it may puzzle future archaeologists if those exist. And what they will find is a global, very thin layer of carbon polymers that was all of our plastic. Many scientists around the world already recognize this. In fact, we estimate that products forged and manufactured by man already outweigh all the natural materials on the surface of the earth. And 9 billion tons of it is plastic that we've made in the last 70 years. We classify geologic time into eras, periods, and epochs. And each of these classifications is marked by some sort of significant change that happens in the fossil record or something that occurred to the planet. Up until recently, we considered ourselves to be living in the Holocene epoch, which started at the end of the last ice age about 12,000 years ago. But scientists have now agreed and recently established a brand new epoch called the Anthropocene in honor of the changes that humans have caused. And this starts about 1850, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we started burning fossil fuels and drastically changing our planet. Unfortunately, this comic is all too true. All of our plastics made from crude oil have incredibly long decomposition times. This picture shows a yogurt container from 1976. It washed up on the other side of the ocean, and even after getting beat up by wind and water for 45 years, it still looks usable. One of the most common items we find in ocean trash hotspots, more on that in a minute, are old toys. Legos, for example. Studies estimate that they will take 1,300 years to decompose in the ocean. Now, Mr. Grop's a big fan of Legos, so we're not going to go at them too hard. The real problem are what we call one-time use plastics. These now dominate our life, and we take many of them for granted. If only bananas had a protective outer coating so that we wouldn't have to individually wrap them in plastic and put them on a non-biodegradable styrofoam tray. Maybe we could wash our vegetables instead of putting them on a plastic tray and sealing them in another coating of plastic. If you get asked on an FRQ about the problems with single-use plastic, oh my goodness, well, here's a whole bunch of choices for you. We've covered 1, 2, and 3, but number 4 jumps out at me. What happens to all that plastic that we think we are recycling when we throw it into the bins? The hard and disappointing truth is that the majority of it actually just gets thrown away eventually. We simply can't actually recycle it all. The oil companies have known this, and yet they continue to produce plastic, profit from it, and lie about it being able to be recycled. There now are some plastics that are banned. There was a time where all the rage in consumerism was to put tiny little quote-unquote scrubbing beads into a lot of our health products, our bath washes, our toothpaste. Well, it turns out that the little plastic beads that they were including were non-biodegradable. They would go down our drains and end up being consumed by wildlife, and many times leading to their actual deaths. But here's one that might surprise you. I'm guessing you don't know who the second largest polluter is behind fossil fuel industry. It's the fashion industry. The manufacturing of clothes is actually quite complicated. Many of the new comfortable and durable materials that our clothes are now made of come from derivatives of crude oil. And as always, you can see that Mr. Grapp only uses the most reliable and hard-hitting environmental journalism sources, like Teen Vogue. Believe it or not, they do post a lot of environmental issues. Maybe give them a follow. They did not pay me to say that, unfortunately. The real problem is that a lot of our comfortable clothes have plastic microfibers. When we wash them, they wear out, break off, and end up in our sewers. That eventually washes to the ocean, where it then, of course, accumulates and affects wildlife. And that is true for so much of our wasted plastic. Because of watersheds, it is continually being carried to the oceans. In fact, this troubling stat, by 2050, there will be more plastic by weight than there are fish in the ocean. This is both a cause of our poor waste management, but also the things we've already talked about with overfishing. The majority of our plastic garbage in the ocean has accumulated between North America and Asia. There are actually two major spots that we call the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. A lot of the plastic is discarded fishing gear. Some estimate almost 45%. But other studies say there are almost 2 trillion pieces of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. There have been some efforts to clean it up, but everything has been small scale so far. The choices you make in the products you use and how you reuse or dispose of them actually does make a difference in this world. We know what the solutions are. The real question is, are we willing, as a society, to actually do what we need to do? Well, that's fossil fuels. A lot to think about. As we move forward, we'll start to look at some of these potential solutions, especially related to energy. Something to look forward to that's positive. Alright, hang in there, guys. I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.